Guys, welcome to Talk with Nick again. Today I have a new friend and a new guest named Vaibhav. He has done his bachelor's from Delhi Technological University, master's from Indian Institute of Technology, and is presently doing PhD from Cornell University. So we're gonna know everything about physics and related fields and how to make a professional career in physics field. So Vaibhav, thank you so much for coming into this show, and I really appreciate your time to give me your time. So, can you tell us a little bit about yourself, just a brief, and then I'm gonna pick it up from there.
You're welcome. Yeah, so I'm from Delhi. Grew up there. My parents still live there. I, for some reason, joined engineering because who doesn't, right? So I did my bachelor's in mechanical engineering at Delhi Technological University, like Nick mentioned. And in my engineering, I realized that engineering wasn't for me, or I didn't have fun doing it. And instead, I liked physics, and I used to read it by myself. And I thought, why not go for a career in it? So I did that. I transitioned into a master's degree in physics. I did an MSc from IIT Bombay, which was great. It was a great experience. IIT Bombay was lovely. And that helped me get into Cornell for a PhD in physics, which was one of my dream universities. And here I am now I'm starting my fourth year in PhD now. So PhD is a little long, but it's been a good ride so far. And yeah, I still love physics as much as I did 5 years back.
Oh, that's really great. Thanks for the introduction, man. Now I'm very curious because a lot of students in India or in anywhere around the world have questions about how does the process looks like to get a PhD admission in one of the top universities in Cornell, like in Cornell, Stanford, Harvard. These are one of the top, many of the top universities in USA. So how does the process works? What are the key requirements to get shortlisted for these kind of universities? If you can share, like, how did you plan your strategy, and did you apply to many universities, or did you just had shortlisted few universities? So in a way, like, you can explain.
Yeah. So admissions here in the US, or I think anywhere except India, is like it's not based on exams, right? In India, we're used to entrance exams, and you study for an exam, you get a rank, and you're guaranteed. It's not like that here. It can be very random. It's very luck based sometimes, but it's not just luck. So you of course there's things in your control. So basically, for PhD admission, and I can speak about physics, but I think it's probably similar for other fields as well, is the universities want to look for a solid profile, right? So a solid physics profile is what you need. It's not a score on a test. It's a solid profile. And in fact, one thing I would mention is that things in fact have changed when I got admitted to PhD, or someone who applies now, because Cornell has made GRE optional. And optional means that they cared less about it, and then now they probably don't even care at all about it. Like, it's optional. So that's a big change from when I did it, and now if someone would do it. A lot of other universities, I think Harvard, MIT, a lot of other physics universities, I think, have either removed the GRE or made it optional. So there's that. So even that part of the score is gone. So what do they look for? So what they look for is basically, since it's a physics PhD, they want you to be prepared. So they look for good undergraduate grades good grades in standard undergraduate physics courses. So there's that. So you definitely need to do that. And every top university does demand solid grades. So that's one very important aspect of that. The second aspect of the profile would be, if you're doing a PhD, that means you like research and you enjoy physics. So you have to show them that you have done physics, that you have done some research, you have some research experience. So that's the second thing they look for, that do you have some research experience? Do you even know what you did and why you want to do a PhD? So that becomes one solid reason. And if you have good research experience, that's important. And with that, so research experience is closely tied to something called letters of recommendation. So typically for admission, you need 3 professors to recommend you. So 3 professors would have to say, they would have to write a letter and say, XYZ candidate is awesome, XYZ is great at physics and would be a great fit for the PhD at your university, right? And that again ties with the research experience, that if you do research with 3 different professors or study under them, and if you impress them, you do well, then they're going to write nice things about you. So that is kind of tied down. I think these 2 are the most important things. And the third pillar, I would say, they also demand a statement of purpose, which is where that's also very important, because that's where you write down why you want to do a PhD. You have to be very mature in convincing the admission committee that, you you know what you're talking about, the physics you have done, the research you have done, you understand that. You were just not, like a what we call a wrench monkey, that you just did work and didn't understand it, right? So you have to convince them that you understand the physics you do, you understand what you want to do, you're mature about it, and you have goals that would be fulfilled by a PhD in the, whatever university you're applying to. So those would be the three main pillars of building a profile and getting an admission.
All right, that's great. So I will pick up each point and try to find a question in around that area. I'm very happy that you mentioned that the GRE is an optional, because a lot of students were asking if GRE is optional or not. And now I'm curious if there is any particular source of information where students can go and check if GRE is required for that particular university or not. So if you know any source about that, please just send me a link later on and I can post it in my description section. And then the second point you said about the research experience, like you need to have a research experience, which is quite important. So did you had any particular kind of research experience in the field of physics, or in the research field that you are presently doing your PhD? And did all those research experiences had any connections, or they were kind of random research experiences?
Yeah, that's a good point. Right. So when I decided I want to go into physics, I went for a master's degree at Bombay, right? And at that point, I mean, you're not that mature. You don't really know what you have to do, what you want to do. And, I liked physics, but I didn't know what exactly I liked in physics or what am I good at. So at IIT Bombay, I tried to gain sort of research experience, and I tried to broaden my experience. So I did research, I did 2 or 3 projects, and they were not related at all. I mean, in some sense, yeah, they were completely unrelated. But what they helped me to do was that they helped me understand what exactly, what subfield in physics that I like, right? If I try them, then I would know that, I like this better than that. So there's that. The other strategic way you can think about it is that I mentioned that you need 3 recommendation letters, right? Which means working with only one professor is probably not enough. So you can think that it's a strategic move to get different research experiences, to get different recommendation letters, or just get different experience, and you would actually, it would be good for your life. You would know what research you want to do, and because that's what you want to do. PhD is a long thing, and you have to do it for 4, 5, 6 years. So it's wise to do that. But yeah, it was just different research experiences, no deep connection or anything.
All right, that's great. And for how long did you get that particular each research experience? Like, did you stay with the one professor for 2 to 3 months and then move to another professor? So how did you manage to get all those research experiences? Did you used to go to the professor by just by knocking on the door and say, hey, I want an internship, or you used to send an email to the professor? How did you manage to do these things?
Right. So I think the professor I worked with, and I ended up doing my master's thesis under that professor. I literally just knocked on his door. I mean, yeah, because he was at IIT, right? And if you're in the same institution, it's fine, right? You can do that. That's one perk of being in the same institution. So I literally knocked on his door, and I just told him that I have no experience in this field, but I read about your work. It sounds exciting, and I'm ready to learn and work. If you give me a project, I'll work hard. I'll try what I can do with it, and I really want to do it. That's all. And he gave me a project. We worked on it. Then we worked on other things, and I in fact worked with him until the end of my master's degree because he became my thesis advisor. So I worked with him for 1 year. Other than that, I also went on a summer internship from IIT Bombay. I went to Bristol in England, and there I worked with a professor for 2.5 months. And so yeah, that was just 2.5 months, nothing more, nothing less. But it was nice 2.5 months. You can't really finish a project most likely, but you can make decent progress on something. And I did that. I learned a few things. I enjoyed it, and I think he was also happy with my work. So that's a 2.5 month experience as compared to the 1 year I mentioned. And then there was another professor I worked with, and I think I worked with him for 5 or 6 months. He was again at IIT Bombay, and this is again, either shoot an email or you can just knock on their doors. So yeah, 2 professors from IIT Bombay and 1 on the summer internship from Bristol.
All right, that's great. You mentioned that you went to Bristol. So can you tell us a little bit about it? Like, how did you find that professor, and was this internship funded?
Yes, it is funded. So IIT Bombay has a very nice internship cell, and so they they typically every year they manage to get some positions from professors who are looking for students to work on research. And so every year, so it's not like I contacted the professor at Bristol. There's an internship cell at IT Bombay that does that. And then they sort of have an internal process where you apply for the position and you interview and stuff. It's all taken care by the internship cell at IT Bombay. So I didn't really do anything. And it was funded, and they funded travel and accommodation. They gave like a monthly stipend, which I ended up overspending, but nevertheless, they gave me money. Not that it was enough because
Wow, that's great. That's great. Like I didn't know that internship cell has an important role to play to get such great internships. Good to hear that. I think this message should also be spread out to the universities in India that they need to build up their internship cell so that the students can get better internships. Thank you so much for sharing this information.
Yeah.
Now, once you have built up your profile, you have a CV, you have internships, you have recommendation letters. Now comes the important point that you need to find a PhD. And in order to find a PhD, there are many steps. You need to find your supervisor, you need to shortlist the universities. So how did you go about it? Did you just shortlisted the universities first, or you shortlisted the supervisors first? You had something in your mind that you want to work in this field and you want to work with these particular supervisors. So what was your strategy?
Right. So I think the first thing, at least that would be my advice, and what I did was that you need to figure out at least roughly what you want to do, right? So in physics, there are different subfields which are very different, and they're like not similar at all. Maybe somebody wants to do particle physics or condensed matter physics or biophysics. There's different things. So you figure out sort of the broad area of what you want to work on. It's not like to figure out exactly what project you're doing. You probably won't figure out even 2 years into a PhD. But what you want to figure out is a broad area, right? That it's something in some domain that okay, I want to do. Once you do that, then so another important thing is we think of I'm applying to a top university. Like we think of a top university, and we're like, I want to apply to it, but that's not a good idea because not every physics department of every university has professors in the field you're interested in. Professors keep retiring, they keep hiring, professors leave, tons of things happen. Sometimes they just don't have professors in that subfield. So once you decide your subfield, you have the internet, you have to crawl through all the university web pages. What I did was that I went to some random ranking, and the reason I used a ranking because I wanted a list of university. It was not like I was going and the top 10 or something. A ranking just gave me, somebody has made a list that's on a web page. I go in each university, I put it in Google, the physics department, look at faculty, right? And you can sort faculty by research areas typically. And just see that in your broad research area, at least I would say you should have 3 or 4 professors working in, at least 2 or 3, let's say, professors working in that broad research field that you want. So then if that's true, then that university goes into some sort of a preliminary shortlist, right? And if a university doesn't have professors in that area, it has only 1 professor or no, that university is eliminated. Whether it can be Harvard, it can be any university, right? So once you do that, it's a preliminary shortlist that's, I don't know, it can be 50 universities, 60 universities. I'm not going to apply to 50, right? Because the other thing is applying to each university costs money. They have application fee, which is roughly $100 for each, which in Indian rupees, it's like 7,000 rupees. And it's quite a lot. So once you have that preliminary shortlist, what you then have to do, at least what I did, was I trimmed it down to about 8 universities. And the way I did that was that you should apply to a range of universities, right? There's your dream universities that you want. So maybe 2 or 3 of those, 2 or 3, they're really good, but maybe not in a dream bracket. So you have to diversify a little, right? Don't put all your eggs in one basket. And so do that and sort of apply to a range of 8 or 10, something close to that number. You do that shortlist and then you apply.
All right, that's great. And did you just apply to United States, or you had other countries in your mind as well?
Yeah, I would say mostly United States was in my mind. I did apply to the UK university in Bristol that I went to. That was because I kind of knew I would get in there because the professor liked me, and it was my sort of a safety. But that's because I worked with the professor, right? But my plan was to mostly go to the US because I like their program better for me.
All right. Okay. And can you tell us a little bit about how the stipend thing works? Do you have to apply for an external scholarship, or when you apply to the university program, you directly are enrolled in a stipend program or a scholarship program?
So in the US, now I can only speak for the US. I think this might be different in Europe, but they shouldn't be. I mean, so for a PhD, you're always funded. You should never do a PhD where you have to pay money, because PhD is actually you're doing it as, when other people would be doing a job, they would be earning money, you're doing a
Exactly.
PhD. So that means if you're still paying a fee and not getting anything back, don't do a PhD, right? You need to be independent. Even if you're getting paid less, you should get paid something. So it's always funded. And at least in the US, it is that if you apply to university and get accepted, they would say they would guarantee funding, as in you would be funded. But the question is, how would you get funded? That changes. So in US, what happens is that if you get admitted, you're funded. Um, but typically, there are two ways you can get funded. One is you can be a teaching assistant, where there would be some physics course that a professor would be teaching, and you'd be a teaching assistant. The other thing is called research assistant, where a professor directly funds you for research. A professor pays you money and you do research. And so what they guarantee is that you'd be paid one way or the other. Either you would be a teaching assistant or a research assistant. So you would get money. But the thing with teaching assistant is that you would have to assist in the teaching of the course, and you have to do research. While with the research assistantship, you only have to do research and you don't care about teaching.
So you would say that getting a research assistant is better than getting a teaching assistantship, right?
Yes, absolutely. Although teaching is fun, and I like teaching. Also, typically in theoretical physics, funding is less compared to experimental physics. They get less money. So, like for example, my professor, he has grant money, but what he does is that he funds me one semester, so he gives me that research assistantship one semester, and the other semester he asks me to teach, because he has to support many students, and that's how much money he has. So one semester I teach and one semester I research. Teaching does take away some time, but it's also fun. And I would mention that if you want to like become a professor, or if you want to go into academia, that teaching experience does help.
Yeah. Okay. That's great. And can you tell us a little bit about how much does one student get when he's doing a teaching assistantship or research assistantship? Is it like enough to have a good life, specifically in big cities in USA? Like, can you save some money, or can you enjoy your life with that money?
So one thing, teaching and research assistantship, typically they're the exact same money. There's usually no discrimination in that. So yeah, you get funded the same thing. It's just the amount of work differs. Regarding how much you get paid, it varies a lot. Mm, every university pays you differently. It's often dependent on the living cost, right? Depending on, I don't know, if University of San Francisco, they have the highest rent, so you'd be paid a little more, but you would realize that little more money doesn't is not actually more, right? Because you're paying more for rent, you're paying more for food, right? Or if you're in a small rural town, you might be paid less. Like you would see that your salary is less, but it's actually more, right? Because you're actually spending less, the rent is less. So it varies a lot. I would say Cornell pays really well. We are in a town in New York State, so it's not New York City. So the rent is high here, nevertheless. But I think I can say Cornell pays well, and you can have a very healthy life on your salary. But raising a family might be a different thing that I don't know about. But if you're a single bachelor, yeah,
All right. Very, very well said. I think, thank you so much. I have got all the answers relevant to PhD selection process and salary. So I will just shift up to a little bit about your work, what you are doing. Like I read about your about in LinkedIn. It says like I'm a PhD student in physics at Cornell University. My research is in theoretical physics, where I study remarkable behavior of matter when it is deeply quantum mechanical regime. I use both analytical and numerical calculations to try and come up with simple, intuitive explanations of novel phenomena. To be frank, I didn't understand any of this thing, except the word of novel phenomena. And I really want to uh, convey this message to the students between 18 to 25 who is maybe thinking about theoretical physics. What is it like? If you have to explain to a kid, not a kid, but just a student who is in the sophomore or in the middle of undergraduate school, and to grab his attention about theoretical physics. So how would you do that?
Okay. So one thing I got to know is that my LinkedIn bio is probably not very transparent. I should change it. So thank you for that. Yeah, I mean, when you write it yourself, you don't know. I mean, I understand it because I wrote it, but the important thing is others should understand. So thanks for that. Right. So theoretical physics. Maybe I can tell some sort of broad things that motivate me, right? And it's related to what I do. It's not exactly what I do, but I would give a very broad description of what it is about so that you don't need any technical details.
Mm-hmm.
So, for example, something which I do is called quantum many-body physics. And if we unpack that, so you probably know that quantum mechanics is, things when are things very, very small, like, atoms and electrons, and the behavior is very different. You have things which are both particles and waves, stuff you might have heard. So there's that. And many body means that there's not just one particle, but many particles. And why is that interesting, right? So one example I can give is that this is not something I work on, but this is just an example to motivate, right? So for example, if you look at our brain, right? If you go to a neurosurgeon, or if you look at the existing knowledge about the brain, a neurosurgeon or somebody who studies the brain, they know what the individual parts of the brain do, right? They know it's made of different nerves or neurons, cells and tissues. They can even tell this part of the brain does that, this part of the brain does that. So the individual parts of the brain are decently understood. What's lacking, however, is somehow magically those different parts, you understand each of them, but those different parts when combined give you this consciousness, right? The sense of being that we are very different from machines, right? And that magic we don't understand, right? We understand the individual parts, but somehow when they're connected and they're together, they have this entirely different thing that we don't know at all. It's a similar thing in physics, right? So for example, we almost decently understand what a single electron does or what a single atom does, even with quantum mechanics. But somehow when you have a bunch of atoms or a bunch of electrons, they talk to each other, they interact with each other, magic happens. Things happen which are super different than what you would expect, and we actually don't understand that. Like for example, there are atoms which form a liquid, and if you cool them down to very low temperatures, it's like the liquid is literally, you put water in a bowl, it stays there. This liquid is called a superfluid. It would automatically just flow, like it would flow out of the bowl and pour down without any force, without anything, right? And this magic happens because somehow it's those individual atoms we understand. When you put them together, something else happens that we don't know. And theoretical physics, or what I do, is about that we see these different things that we don't know when you put many atoms together. And that's what I try to study, that you put these atoms together, what happens or what can happen. That's the kind of thing I study.
So, uh, well, very well explained. I really got fascinated by the neuroscience part, because I also like to study neuroscience in general, because I'm involved in different kind of physical activities and movement culture, and I try to understand how different body parts behave together and gives you a kind of like you mentioned the word consciousness. But when you said the theoretical physics, do you have to do experiments in order to, because it's theoretical physics, right? So do you have any practical experiments as well?
Right. So I don't do experiments because I'm not good at it, right? The experimental physicists were good at it and they do awesome experiments. But I guess if you mean that, what's the role of experiments in general, right? Experiments are very important and they are the backbone of physics, right? And that's kind of what separates physics from math. Theoretical physics can sometimes be very mathematical, but the difference that we have with mathematicians is that it's useless if you can't see it in experiments, right? In some sense, that because physics is based on evidence of how the world works, right? And so if you work on some theory, maybe I'm working on some case where I have a bunch of atoms, they interact, they're in certain situation. I say, okay, they behave remarkably, and there's this novel thing that happens, or this magic that happens. If nobody can see it in experiments, then why would you believe it, right? It's just up to me, right? I invented a situation, I did some complicated mathematics, and I say, this happens. But if you don't see it in nature, then that's not evidence that it does happen in nature, right? So, and that's what experiments do. And so experimentalists, what they do is that they test what nature can do and what nature does do. That's what experimentalists would do.
All right. And you mentioned that you use like numerical calculations and some analytical calculations to come up with novel phenomena. So if you have to say to some again, like the sophomore, I will come back to sophomore and mid undergraduate school. Uh, would you say that that is the right time to start exploring about these subjects? If yes, what kind of beginner level of books, or how can they initiate their process to understand these kind of things? Like, what is the best strategy to go into this field, specifically in theoretical physics? Because
Right.
I
So
think there is no subject as theoretical physics in
right. Yeah.
undergraduate
Yeah.
or master school, right?
Yeah. Yeah. No. So theoretical and experimental is just, it's a division which says that theorists sort of do calculations, right? And experimentalists actually go into the lab and do experiments and test those calculations. That's maybe one way of saying it. Right. And if somebody wants to get into theoretical physics, so mathematics is central to theoretical, it's central to physics, not just theoretical
Okay.
physics, right? Even experimentalists also do mathematics, but theoretical physics, that takes a major role, the mathematics. So I would say if you're an undergrad, yeah, try to sort of solidify your understanding in the mathematical foundations of physics, which if I have to name, it would be ordinary differential equations. That's pretty important. There's linear algebra, which would be matrices and vectors, vector calculus, where you divergence and curl and integration and stuff. And you would find that in, like, if you pick up a mathematical physics book, one I remember is called Mary Boas Mathematical Methods in Physics. That has all this basic mathematics, and I think you should be solid in that. And for the physics part, it's just the basics, right? If you have to start with your introductory quantum mechanics, you just do that well, and I think that's a great stepping stone to do anything. Your introductory classical mechanics, there's electromagnetism, and there's statistical mechanics. Those four I mentioned because any PhD program you look at, they would say, we want your good grades in these four core courses, and that sort of covers a lot of physics. So yeah, you just get a solid understanding in these, and I think that's a great platform to do research in anything in physics.
All right. Thank you so much. And thank you so much for also reminding all these subjects, because now I'm trying to figure out when I was in 19 or 20, or like in my high school, and there is the scene of, going into the coaching classes, and all these subjects are there, like the basics of these subjects. But I think all these subjects are, it's after this not relevant to the talk we are having, like, but also I wanted to create an awareness among the Indian society and the Indian parents, like this the thing of getting an engineering degree is not for everybody, because the subjects are quite different, and nobody can grasp is it the same way, like the 10,000 students who get shortlisted in IIT. So, like, for example, like, I had a very good self-awareness. I knew that I will never be able to crack IIT. So I took a back step, and I knew that it's not for me, and I don't enjoy subjects like this. So there is some kind of an awareness in a student that let him understand that, yes, I can go for it. Because for me, like when I was trying to apply for entrance exams, I had some kind of peer pressure, not from my parents, but just like everywhere, like everybody is doing this thing, and I was in this thing, okay, maybe this is something that I want to do. But slowly and gradually it collapsed, and I knew that it's not for me. So how to create this awareness specifically in the age group between 16 to 18? Because now these days, like, parents, they are putting their kids who is in fifth standard to the coaching classes. I think this is really crazy. And that's one of the goal of these videos, is to create an awareness among Indian parents that there are so many different kind of careers, and it could be phenomenal. Like you mentioned about all these subjects, all these quantum physics, and how to go about it. Can you share a little bit about it? Like, what was your awareness when you were young? Because you said you were reading physics, even though it was not in your curriculum. Like, I think it's very rare. So can you tell us, like, what was your awareness about this subject?
Yeah, I think so. One thing I think when we are 16, 17, right? That would be like 11th standard, like 10th to 12th standard in school, right? um, I think our system is such that we're sometimes forced to choose subjects, right? That when we enter into college, you have to choose a branch of engineering. That's when you're in 12th, right? And I honestly think if you're 17 years old, good luck if you have everything figured out, but most of us haven't, right? Because you're just 17, right? You just have gone to school, done silly things with friends, right? It's
Exactly.
definitely not necessary that you know what your career is going to be. Some people do, which is great, but most people don't. So for example, here, I think in the American universities, I think you get admitted to the university, but you don't sort of lock your major or the subject of study, I think for like 2 years. So you get 2 years to, do different courses and you can change your majors. And then the precise reason is that they give you time, like they give you 2 years to figure out what you want to do, right? If I'm in school, how would I know that I want to do physics? Maybe I do, but I think most people, at least I didn't, right? So one thing that I would say is that if you don't know what to do, it's okay. Many people don't, right? And I can tell you, I did engineering. I ended up not doing anything related to engineering. I have several friends, right, who did engineering with me in my class, and a lot of them are not doing anything related to engineering, right? They went into so many different fields. Somebody is in designing, a lot of people go into business and all sorts of things, right? So it's fine if you don't figure it out at school level. It's okay. The other thing of how to figure it out, I think you just have to explore, right? Maybe sometimes, like when you were in school, we don't get to explore that much. It's natural, but I think when you get into college, I think that's the time to really explore and really figure out what you want to do. I think you're 3 years or 4 years in college, you meet different people, right? Maybe you are in one branch of engineering, but tons of people are in other branches. There are societies, there are clubs. I think that's the point in life when you can figure out. You can still change things later on, but I think that's where I figured out. So for example, we had a physics course in my first year in engineering, and then you don't have any physics courses. But I found that I liked it, and I started, just did some light physics reading, and it turns out that I enjoyed it, right? I just had fun, and at the same time I was not having fun in engineering. So I figured out that, okay, this is what I want to do. I don't want to do engineering. I know some of my friends, he used to do some creative designing while he was an engineer. And again, he had fun doing that creative designing, and he realized that, engineering is not that fun, but creative designing is fun. Once you have fun doing something, you want to do it more and you get better at it. It's like a nice feedback cycle, right? You're having fun, that's why you do it more, you become better. If you become better, then you have more fun, right? And it just keeps going on and on, and at that point you figure out, hey, why don't I just do it for a career? Yeah, so that's how I figured out. The other thing is that we have the internet, which is both good and bad. But the good thing about it is that now it's not just your parents who tell you what's good for you. You have, this YouTube channel, or you have, tons of YouTube channels, lectures. There's too much stuff out there. But the point is that if you look for it, you'll find whatever you want. So I would say college is the time. Explore, figure out, talk to people, follow YouTube channels, and just get to know what's out there. Once you know that, only then you would, then go on and explore and do something and figure out what you're having fun in.
All right. Thank you so much. I'm gonna sleep on this message, like about what you said. Like once you have fun doing something, you do more about it. So it's like a feedback cycle. Very well said. I think I'm gonna sleep on it. And thank you so much, Weber, for giving me your time. I think you have explained very nicely all the points about the scholarship and about how to explore your things and about how to explore your passion. Thank you very much for giving me your time. And I think it's gonna be really, really useful for all the kids, I think, as well as parents in India. So thank you so much.
Thank you for inviting me. It was great. Yeah.
Yeah, I'm glad that you liked it.
Yeah.